It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.
It's a new way to vacation. Welcome to the 4 parks of Universal Orlando Resort, including the all-new Universal Epic Universe. From the wizarding world of Harry Potter to Jurassic Park to spectacular themed hotels, we offer an entire week's worth of excitement. Vacations will never be the same. Visit universalorlando.com.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. I'm a grizzled veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, from Nixon through Reagan, working for Senator Bob Dole, who would have been a great president, right through Donald Trump. I may be the first person in the country to suggest to Donald Trump that he would not only be a great presidential candidate, but that he would be a truly great president. And although I have a sentimental affection for the Republican Party of Lincoln, Eisenhower, Goldwater, Reagan, Nixon, of course, and Trump, well, I give it to you straight. Here on the Roger Stone Show, I will criticize both Republicans and Democrats. I must say there is a new optimism in the country after Donald Trump's sweeping victory in the election just a few weeks ago. Normally, when I would go out to the grocery store, the drugstore, the liquor store, I would wear a hat and glasses because, frankly, I just didn't want to get into shouting matches with libtards calling me a Russian traitor or denigrating our 45th and 47th president. But the day after the election, Mrs. Stone asked me to stop by the grocery store to pick up a few things, and I was already wearing a Trump for Peace T-shirt, which my friend Anthony Constantino had given to me. And I was shocked at the response. I bet 25, almost 30 people came up to me, disproportionately African Americans. That's not a scientific sample, but it's interesting, telling me that they believe the country had narrowly averted disaster. Seems like people know that there is a new sheriff in town. Things are going to change dramatically. We're going to bring inflation down. We're going to close our border, crack down on fentanyl and the drug crisis in America. Gasoline prices will be coming down. But most importantly, it appears to me like we will be able to avert World War III. I tried to find a song that would really kind of sum up the feeling of the country, and I came up with this one because, you see, the country really is in the very best of hands.
Them city folks and we-uns are pretty much alike, though they ain't used to living in the sticks. We don't like stone or cement, but we is in agreement when we gets down to talking politics. The country's in the very best of hands, the best of hands, the best of hands. The Treasury says the national debt is climbing to the sky, and government expenditures have never been so high. It makes a fella get a gleam of pride within his eye to see how our economy expands. The country's in the very best of hands. The country's in the very best of hands. The best of hands. The best of hands. You ought to hear the Senate when they're drawing up a bill, whereas's and to wits are crowded in each codicil. Such legal terminology would give your heart a thrill. There's phrases there that no one understands. The country's in the very best of hands. The building boom, they say, is getting bigger every day. And when I asked the feller, how can everybody pay? He come up with an answer that made everything okay. Supplies are getting greater Don't you believe them congressmen and senators are dumb? When they run into problems that is tough to overcome, they just declares a thing they calls a moratorium. The upper and the lower house disbands. The country's in the very best of hands. Us voters is connected to the nominee. The nominee's connected to the treasury. When he ain't connected to the treasury, he sits around in his thigh bone. They sits around in his place they got. This big congressional parking lot just sits around on the you-know-what. Up there they calls them their thigh bone. Them bones gonna rise again, gonna exercise a franchise again, gonna tax us up to our eyes again. When he gets them off in their thigh bone. The country's in the very best of hands. The best of hands. The best of hands. The farm bill should be 89% of parity. Another fellow recommends it should be 9 to 3. But 80-95%, who cares about degree? It's parity that no one understands. The country's in the very best of hands. Them GOPs and Democrats each hates the other one. They's always criticizing how the country should be run. But neither tells the public what the other's gone and done. As long as no one knows where no one stands. The country's in the very best of hands. They sits around in this place they're at, where folks in Congress has always sat. Just sits around on their excess fat. Up there they calls them their thigh bone. They sits around till they starts to snore. Jumps up and hollers out has the floor. Then sits right down where they sat before. Up there they calls them their thigh bone. Them bones gonna rise again, so dignified and so wise again, while the budget doubles in size again. When it gets them off in their thigh bone. The country's in the very best of hands. The best of hands. The best of hands. The money that they taxes us, that's known as revenues. They compounds up collateral, subtracts the residues. Don't worry about the principal and interest that accrues. They're shipping all that stuff to foreign lands. The country's in the very best of hands.
And there you have it, folks. That is, of course, from the Broadway play Little Abner. That was the immortal Stubby Kaye and Peter Palmer, and I think it sums up our political system pretty well. But the country really is in the very best of hands because Donald Trump is off to a very first start. Unlike his first term, when he came to Washington from the world of business, and he perhaps didn't quite understand how Washington worked and how treacherous both parties are, this time he has dug deep into his transition. He's not just interviewing the candidates for cabinet secretaries and other cabinet-ranked offices. He's also personally interviewing the candidates for assistant secretary and deputy secretary. This is going to be an incredible administration. I think we're about to enter a golden age of prosperity, peace, security, and justice. There's little doubt in my mind that we are about to undertake a complete reform of our country, an American revolution, and we're going to talk about it more right here on The Roger Stone Show. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. Many people were surprised when President Donald Trump announced that firebrand Congressman Matt Gaetz would be his attorney general. Then, in a very quick sequence of events, Gaetz withdrew from consideration when it became clear that certain Republican members of the U.S. Senate would not confirm him, and he put his self-interest aside and stepped aside. The president very swiftly announced that former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi would serve as his attorney general. Now, what people may have forgotten is that Gaetz, who is an attorney and one of the sharpest members of the House, as well as one with the sharpest elbows when it comes to taking on the deep state and the Democrats, can now serve as a special counsel at the appointment of the attorney general and the president without any Senate confirmation. At least that's what the Democrats say in their appointments of both Jack Smith and Robert Mueller. So I wouldn't be shocked, as if was hinted at his X profile, if Matt Gaetz is soon appointed a special counsel to look into the Russian collusion hoax. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, who I know well, I was actually with her the day she was announced as Attorney General. There was a precursor by some. Christian prophet Chris Reed, all the way back in 2019, had this revelation. Let's listen to this.
I'm pulling up on my phone for you. No, this is a Facebook post. You can find it on my posts on Facebook. November 23rd, 2019, Pam Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida, you have been chosen prophetically by God to become a great voice for justice and fairness in America. Your days of serving this great nation are not over. Will you accept? You will rise higher than ever before to be a voice of reason and a voice for the weak. The scales of justice you hold in your hand, though despised by many, this will change, and you will fill a role in this nation to bond a divided nation together while protecting the weak and a healing balm to a wounded nation. You will be Attorney General, a general in an army to lead further exposing of corruption and evil. You have a chance to shine bright. Don't miss the time of your opportunity. Prophetic word given to Chris Reed almost exactly 5 years ago to the day.
Absolutely amazing. Pam Bondi will be a great attorney general, as she was for the state of Florida. But also one of the other standout appointees is Tom Homan. Tom Homan, the former director of ICE, our border patrol agents in the first Trump administration. Under Tom Homan and Donald Trump, illegal border crossings had decreased to a trickle, of course, only to explode after the Biden administration repealed all of the executive orders that kept our border secure. Now, Tom Homan has reemerged as the immigration czar, working directly for President Trump and working to secure our borders. Interestingly enough, a number of grandstanding Democrats across the country, including the mayor of Denver, have come forward to say that they will thwart efforts by the federal government to deport people who are here illegally. If a Republican did that, we'd be accused of insurrection. But Tom Homan is a no-nonsense guy. Here's what he had to say about that.
Tom, you heard this mayor out there in Colorado. I want to get your reaction to it. And I want you to be clear about who has jurisdiction, the federal government or state and local governments. And if you're a sanctuary state or city, are you breaking the law?
You're absolutely breaking law. All you have to do is look at Arizona versus U.S. You'll see he's breaking the law. But look, me and the Denver mayor, we agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to put him in jail. Because there's a statute, it's Title 8 United States Code 1324 III, and what it says is, it's a felony if you knowingly harbor and conceal illegal alien from immigration authorities. It's also a felony to impede a federal law enforcement officer. So if we don't want to help, that's fine. He can get the hell out of the way. But we're going to go do the job. President Trump has a mandate for American people. We got to secure this country. We got to save American lives. And I find it shocking that any mayor of a city would say, President Trump's been clear. We want to concentrate on public safety threats and national security threats. I find it hard to believe that any mayor or governor would say they don't want public safety threats removed from their neighborhoods. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on in Denver, but we're going to go and we're going to fix it. If you don't want to fix it, if you don't want to protect his communities, President Trump and ICE will.
There he is, tough-talking Tom Homan, the right man for the job. By the way, President Eisenhower successfully deported 1.3 illegals in the first 2 years of his presidency, so it can be done. All it lacks is the will. Tom Homan is going to deputize local law enforcement and sheriffs. Here is Sheriff, I believe it is Sheriff Richard Jones of Ohio. Let's listen to this.
We could actually go to the workplace and enforce immigration laws. We had it once before, but this president took it all away from all the sheriffs across the country. We house prisoners here. There's two 287Gs, one to hold prisoners, one to go out and took it all away from all. We could actually go to the workplace and enforce immigration laws. We had it once before, but this president took it all away from all the sheriffs across the country. We house prisoners here. There's two 287Gs, one to hold prisoners, one to go out and enforce immigration laws. We were trained, we had the certification, and President Biden's administration took it all away from us. We're going to get that back. We've been in contact with ICE. So it gives us the authority to go out into the community, to go to the workplace, enforce these laws, and help the federal government do their job. And we're happy. We're getting geared up. We're making jail space available. And one thing I know about illegal immigration, I've been doing this 20 years, is when you start going out and enforcing and apprehending people that are here illegally and enforcing the laws where people work in these factories illegally, we've got citizens. I had a lady that came to me and was given information where these places are all over the United States. Sheriffs, there's 3,300 sheriffs in the United States.
There you heard it, Sheriff Richard Jones of Butler County, Ohio. He's going to be enlisted by Tom Homan in this effort to make America safe again. If you're just tuning in, I am Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. And, we'll be right back.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you work so hard for? Now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. Joining us now is Kerry Pickett. She is the senior congressional reporter for the Washington Times. She is one of the very best investigative reporters in the country, having written previously for the Daily Caller and the Washington Examiner. Kerry Pickett has broken a number of bombshell stories about misconduct and corruption in the FBI, but one story she wrote on October 29th really caught my eye. This was in the Washington Times. The headline, Whistleblower, James Comey had FBI honeypot spies infiltrate Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. This is an incredible article. This makes Watergate look like small potatoes. Tell us about this story, Kerry.
Thanks for having me, Roger. Yeah, I'm so glad that you definitely want to have me on today to talk about this, because this particular story, when we first put it up on our WashingtonTimes.com website, when people first saw it, we're talking about a situation here where former FBI Director James Comey, he set up a off-the-books investigation into Donald Trump's first campaign. We're talking about 2015, 2016, to go look into not just Donald Trump, but allies of Donald Trump, such as yourself, and his family, and anything into Donald Trump right after he came down the golden escalator. Now, this was 1 year before Crossfire Hurricane, okay? And what's interesting here, when I say off the books, all right, what I mean is usually when FBI investigations are launched, what happens is that FBI officials, FBI agents, they usually enter into the system some sort of case file, a case number. In this case, no case file, no case number, nothing in the system was ever entered. So what ended up happening was you had two undercover FBI agents, in this case 2 females, who were sent in to Donald Trump's campaign as honeypots to seduce somebody or some people, whomever, over in the Donald Trump campaign starting in 2015. And apparently, some people said, oh, well, that sounds very similar to Crossfire Hurricane. Wasn't it Crossfire Hurricane? Once again, it was not Crossfire Hurricane. It was a year before Crossfire Hurricane. And the thing here was that this lasted for maybe perhaps a year or so. We don't know exactly. We don't know the timeline. But what we do know is that this particular this investigation of James Comey, it wasn't predicated on anything, Roger. It wasn't predicated on Russia. It wasn't predicated on any national security threat, nothing. It was basically just go in and find something on him. We don't know what, just find something. And that in and of itself is completely and utterly illegal. It is completely wrong. And what ultimately it was shut down. Why? Because apparently a major newspaper ended up getting a photo of one of the undercovers. And so the FBI comms people ended up reaching out to that major newspaper and said, hey, we see that you have published a photo here online, and, that's a FBI informant, not an informant, one of the honeypots, one of the full-timers. You have to take that down. Otherwise, this informant of ours is going to get killed. A total lie. But still, the this major newspaper was like, "Ooh, okay, we're going to take it down." But as a result, though, this undercover was still compromised, so they shut down this whole off-the-books investigation. Ultimately, though, because the whole thing was compromised, they shut it down, and one of the honeypots went to the CIA, was transferred, so then they could never, ever be asked about it. You know, they'd never be brought over to Congress. And the other was promoted upwards away into a very high executive level position within the FBI. So now, it's interesting here, Roger, is that I reached out to the FBI for their comment. I reached out to James Comey. Usually, when reporters ask, as you very well know, for organizations for any sort of comment, it's either we have no comment, your source is full of bull, you're full of bull, this whole story's full of bull, no comment whatsoever, like literally like radio silence, nothing, which is very fascinating, especially given this entire story.
The most shocking thing about this is these two evidently attractive female agents were actually traveling with candidate Trump and his campaign staff. And as you point out, this was, in your story, a fishing expedition. There was no evidence of a crime. Imagine my surprise when I woke up on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration to read a New York Times story above the fold on page 1 that said I was one of 3 Trump associates under FBI surveillance for my quote-unquote Russian contacts when I knew that I had no Russian contacts. Again, no predicate for this investigation. It is shocking, but is also, if you look at the greater body of work that you have done on the FBI, this is just one of a number of major stories. You also reported that the Justice Department actually kept FBI employees in the dark for years about whistleblower protections, I gather, to stop people from coming forward. In the case of this honeypot operation, this entire off-the-books operation, directed presumably by James Comey himself, was hidden from Michael Horowitz, who was the Inspector General who did an investigation into the Russian collusion-associated abuses by the FBI.
Absolutely. And not only just Michael Horowitz, but presumably Donald Trump's counsel as well. So, like, not only did Horowitz not know about it, but also Donald Trump's lawyers didn't know about it either. So all of this information was kept away. And as I mentioned again once before, I still haven't had James Comey, come forward because this story's been all over the place. And I'm sure it's popped up on his Google alerts. I mean, I also reached out to him as well. It's not like he's denying it. So there's real problems here right now. And as a former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker, he said of the report that if it's true, and like I said, no one's denying it, he called it a, quote, booming, egregious violation of the rules of the governing of the Attorney General and the FBI. So, we're talking about, real illegalities that could have gone on here. And the question here that could be going on here is, like, who else was sort of involved other than the FBI? Okay? And that is a big question here because, you have to wonder, did he bring in just the undercover operation here? Because if this was totally off the books, if this was a totally rogue operation that James Comey did on his own with just a few others, then that's a big, big problem because it's my understanding, Roger, that they told, basically the people who were just involved, told, okay, guys, do not ever talk about this to anyone and don't ever talk about this whole operation to each other. Otherwise, you're all in trouble. You're going to be facing some bad consequences because, it was almost like implying, yeah, we know this was wrong, but, don't ever talk about it again to each other or to anyone on the outside. So, that's something that could be very interesting going forward.
We're going to go to a quick commercial break here in just a moment. When we come back, we're going to continue with Kerry Pickett with the Washington Times. She has a number of bombshell stories. including a whistleblower who warns that the FBI cannot be trusted to do the background checks for President Trump's news nominees, and also a story regarding the FBI brass's stunned and shell-shocked reaction to Trump's re-election. So you're not going to want to miss all of that. We'll be right back on the Roger Stone show here with Kerry Pickett, one of the very best investigative reporters in the country, currently with the Washington Times, previously with the Daily Caller and the Washington Examiner. You're not going to want to miss the other bombshells that she's covered. We're very glad to have her on the show today. It is this story really blows my mind. Kind of reminds me of when John Brennan went to the other English-speaking intelligence agencies and gave them a list of 26 associates of Donald Trump who should be surveilled and so-called bumped. My name was on that list as well. And then, of course, there was no predicate for that either. And now a word from our sponsor.
Now it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
So, folks, the federal government has not abandoned their plan to move to some kind of digital currency. This is a system in which your paper money would be worthless. The government would give you a plastic credit card for all your purchases, which means they could turn off your money whenever they felt like it. The wild spending that's been going on in Washington, which threatens your retirement, it may slow down and ultimately stop, but that won't happen tomorrow. That's why thousands of Americans are now moving to protect their retirement, protect their nest egg, protect their IRAs and their 401ks, and they're doing it by acquiring precious metals like gold and silver. The Colonial Metals Group is the only group that I trust to do this. You can learn more by going to freegoldguide.com. That's freegoldguide.com. Gold has protected us through every single financial crisis in our history. Learn more by going to freegoldguide.com.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. Now, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We're talking to Kerry Pickett, who is the senior congressional reporter for the Washington Times. Kerry, you had a story on November 12th telling us that the U.S. Justice Department kept FBI employees in the dark for as long as 7 years about whistleblower protections. Tell us about this story.
Okay. So for many years, we were talking about, going all the way back to days of Hoover. Look, there's never really been any real whistleblower protections for FBI agents, period. So finally, by 2016, you have Charles Grassley, Republican of Iowa, who's been a champion of FBI whistleblowers. He and a few others finally cobbled up some great whistleblower protections for FBI agents. And one of them was the fact that FBI agents can now contact, their direct supervisors and saying, hey, I have a whistleblower complaint, saying that there is abuse, malfeasance, maybe witness or evidence tampering, or whatever the case may be of what's going on in the FBI. Because for many years, the current or the previous ways were just that, we have our own whistleblower system within the FBI, and you can go through it and don't worry, nothing's going to happen. But like basically anytime a whistleblower would actually complain about the FBI would just retaliate against them, and it was a horrible system. But in 2016, when this new law passed, they said, no, you can go directly to your supervisor, or you can go to the IG, or you can go directly to Congress. See, this great new legislation just passed in 2016. However, the Justice Department never updated their regulations. So they basically never told anybody at the FBI, hey, guess what? You can go to Congress and give us your whistleblower complaints. Guess what? You can go to the IG and give us your whistleblower complaints, or go directly to your supervisor. They kept it essentially a big secret to FBI personnel, the most important people that they should tell. So this was like for like 8 years, like 7, 8 years. It was essentially like a big secret. So, you know, these FBI personnel were just going through the old system. It wasn't until, you know, like the last 2-3 years that all of a sudden they just ended up discovering it. Oh, wait, this legislation passed in 2016 and we can go directly to Congress. Yeah, you can go to Congress. You can go to the IG. And that was when all of a sudden, when people are going, why is it that these FBI agents, why is it that they're not whistleblowing? Well, they just discovered this like secret text from 2016 that they can go to Congress and all these other places. And that's why the DOJ IG was just like, yeah, they were keeping it from these poor agents who were like suffering this entire time. Incredible.
You also have a bombshell story in which you raise the question about whether, you have a source at the FBI here, about whether the FBI can be trusted to conduct the background checks for President Trump's nominees. Now, this is of particular interest to me because I am outraged by the claims in Son of the Congress that Tulsi Gabbard, who has served her country in combat in both Iraq and Kuwait, who's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, who is a 4-term member of Congress serving on the Armed Services and the Foreign Affairs Committee, is not a patriotic or loyal American simply because she doesn't want to ship billions of dollars more to fund the war in Ukraine. This is an outrageous claim. But I see that Nikki Haley and even Senator James Lankford, a Republican of Oklahoma, as well as others, are saying, well, the FBI needs to vet all of these nominees. I don't know that they can be trusted to do that. Tell us about this incredible story.
All right. Very often, you know, even people who are saying, well, the FBI can't be trusted, they'll like point to like a lot of the things that, you know, people say, oh, you know, like the raid on Mar-a-Lago, you know, Crossfire Hurricane, et cetera, et cetera. And those are totally, you know, good places to start. But like specifically, the people who do the ultimate vetting of the FBI background checks that are done of the nominees are what's known as the security division of the FBI. Okay. And the security, and that's known as SecD in FBI lingo. SecD ultimately gets all the FBI background checks that are done of these nominees. And I'd like to remind everybody, you know, very often you hear about these FBI whistleblowers, okay, that we've already talked about. And over like the past 2 years, we've all heard about these FBI whistleblowers who have come forward, who have said, "Oh, I had my security clearance yanked because I was a conservative, because I was a Trump supporter, because I wouldn't take the COVID jab." And this has been going on for like the last few years now. That like all these FBI whistleblowers were coming forward saying, "Oh, I went to the January 6th rally just to check it out." And then all of a sudden, like the FBI found out, and I had my security clearance yanked. And we found out that the security division within the FBI were basically a bunch of anti-Trump, you know, anti-conservative type of people. I mean, they even circulated like a Trump questionnaire asking FBI colleagues of people who are being investigated for their security clearances, saying, "Hey, does this person over here hate Trump? If they do, you know, we want to know because we're thinking of like yanking their security clearance. Why is this important?" Well, because this same security division, they're the ones who are going to be vetting ultimately all of these White House political nominees. Okay. And, a lot of people don't put two and two together. They're like, wait, hold on a second. Like, these are the people who are going to be like looking at all the background checks that are going to be coming in. Yeah. And not only that, you're going to have people on the 7th floor who are going to have access to all that information that has been brought in to the security division. People like Christopher Wray, people like Paul Abate, who is the deputy director of the FBI. He's the guy who told all the heads of the FBI field offices, hey, you better make sure that all these January 6th investigations are done. So, and on top of that, who also has access to all of these FBI background checks? The White House, the current White House. So therein lies the problem.
All right. Kerry Pickett, the senior congressional reporter for the Washington Times. Kerry, tell people where they can follow you on social media.
Get me at Kerry Pickett, KerryPickett. That's over on X. And get me at the Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com.
Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network. We're joined now by David Schoen, who is a criminal defense lawyer who has focused on matters of civil liberties, civil rights, ballot access issues, and complex legal matters. He very ably represented President Donald Trump in one of the two bogus impeachments against him, and he joins us now on the Roger Stone Show. Counselor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Honor to be here.
So, David, you are our go-to guest when they have complex legal issues that we're trying to parse. This past week, it seems to me that, to some extent, Special Counsel Jack Smith threw in the towel regarding the January 6th D.C.-based charges against President Trump. Earlier, the charges that he had filed in Florida in the so-called documents case were knocked out by Judge Eileen Cannon in a very strong ruling claiming that because Mr. Smith's appointment as a special counsel was unconstitutional, the charges he'd filed would be voided. That argument being that Mr. Smith had never been confirmed by the U.S. Senate to have these sweeping prosecutorial authority, that he had, there was no law providing for his position. There was no budgeting for his seemingly limitless budget. And lastly, it's clearly unconstitutional for any official in the executive branch to be unfireable by the President of the United States. That decision went to the 11th Circuit, but I gather will now become moot in view of Jack Smith's decision to withdraw his charges and resign. In D.C., however, the charges were essentially put on ice. In other words, they were dismissed, as I understand it, with prejudice, which means that they, as I understand it, I'm not an attorney, they could be revived after Donald Trump leaves office. Do I have that right?
They were dismissed without prejudice.
Pardon me.
What you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your view of that?
Well, let me address the 11th Circuit issue first. You've really raised some very hot issues here, and you're right on with all of them. In the 11th Circuit, as you said, Judge Cannon dismissed the case based on violation of the Appropriations Clause and the Appointments Clause of the Constitution surrounding Jack Smith's appointment. That case was pending before the 11th Circuit and still is. Jack Smith moved to dismiss President Trump as a defendant in that case, as an appellee in the case also, but not the other defendants and the appellees. So that issue of the constitutionality of his appointment is still before the court, even though he appears to have indicated he intends to resign. One would think that the new Justice Department coming in will dismiss the entire case. Secondly, in D.C., as you correctly noted, he moved to dismiss the D.C. prosecution, the January 6th events in front of Judge Chutkan. He moved to dismiss that without prejudice. Now, both dismissals, both motions to dismiss, were with the consent of President Trump's lawyers being without prejudice. And that surprised me. Again, with all due respect to them, I would not have consented to that. Jack Smith was required to file a motion to dismiss in both cases. There's a October 16, 2000 memorandum from the Office of Legal Counsel in the Justice Department that's absolutely 100% binding on the Department of Justice, so with respect to federal prosecutions. And that says that, in essence, it piggybacks on the 1973 memo, and it says, in essence, that you cannot bring an indictment or even continue a criminal process against the sitting president. One would argue that it applies in full force to a president-elect as well, based on the principles in the Presidential Transition Act. And so Jack Smith had no choice. He had to dismiss the charges. Some people have suggested, well, he could hold them in abeyance during the presidency. But even he rejected that. And the memo makes quite clear that that's not appropriate either, for a number of reasons that are enumerated in the memo. The stigma that attaches to the president and more importantly, the office of the presidency, the appearance to foreign powers, that there's something hanging over the head of the institution of the presidency or the president with whom they're dealing. It's a distraction to the office, and it raises the separation of powers issue, interfering with the performance of the presidency. The reason he dismissed it without prejudice, and then I'm surprised and disappointed the lawyers agreed to that, is that his theory is the charges could be revived, not held in abeyance during the presidency, but revived and brought anew after President Trump's term is finished 4 years from January. So that's a very dangerous situation. He gets that idea from footnotes 33 to 35 in the 2000 memo, which suggests that there could be a tolling of the statute of limitations so that it would stop right now, and then he would bring it again as if he were bringing it right now, but he would bring it 4 years from now without, in his view, a statute of limitations problem. These folks have shown just how vicious and politically motivated they are. I don't think you can take that kind of chance. So in my view, what should have been done is consent to the motion to dismiss. Smith had to file it under any circumstances, but reserve the right to argue that it should be with prejudice, meaning the charges cannot be brought again, because I believe you're left with the same scenario that the Justice Department said cannot occur, and that's charges hanging over the institution of the presidency. They must be dismissed, and especially in a case like this, where they've been completely politically motivated.
Now, there was also some developments in the Georgia case against Donald Trump and others that grows out of the aftermath of the 2020 election. I saw the headlines, but I confess to you I didn't get a chance to really focus on. What is the status there?
Well, there's a hearing coming up about the status of Fani Willis, the district attorney, and her conflicts of interest, whether she must be dismissed from the case and so on. But again, I say with respect to that case, the entire case must be dismissed for the same principles underlying the Department of Justice memo. It's true, the Department of Justice memo is only binding on the federal Department of Justice. But those same principles, separation of powers and the stigma that it causes and so on, all of those principles apply in full force to the state prosecution. I would also suggest that the supremacy clause is relevant here, and that is we don't allow a state, this is a constitutional principle, we don't allow one state to hamper the operation of the federal government. That's the principle that we see in election cases, Anderson versus Celebrezzi. We don't allow one state to have provisions in the election law with respect to a national election that would then throw the whole national election off kilter. Well, here it would be the same sort of principle, and that is we don't allow one state to interfere with the process. There's a very famous Yale Law School professor, Akhil Amar, who has written an article many years ago, I think during the Clinton era, in which he made this case that the states must not be permitted to pursue criminal indictment or criminal process against a sitting president for the same reasons in the federal memo. And he also says, he gives the example of a southern state that perhaps before secession in the Civil War era, indicted President Lincoln, let's say. Would we really allow that state to arrest President Lincoln and tie up the entire federal government? We shouldn't. And by the way, these folks tried to do that with the Mueller investigation. And that's the pattern of all of these things, trying to stymie President Trump from his agenda that we now see has a clear mandate from the country.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to criminal defense attorney David Schoen, who represented President Donald Trump in one of the two impeachments on the floor of the United States Senate. I want to ask him when we get back about some of the president's appointments, among other things. So whatever you do, folks, don't touch that dial because we'll be right back.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We're talking to David Schoen, a criminal defense lawyer who has specialized in matters of civil liberties, civil rights, ballot access issues. Without any question, one of the sharpest legal minds in the country. Very ably represented President Donald Trump in one of the two impeachments on the floor of the U.S. Senate. You may remember him when he very famously showed a video of multiple Democrats calling for insurrection. And he joins us now. David, thank you once again for joining the show today. It looks to me like the question of the constitutionality of Jack Smith's appointment as special counsel will never get adjudicated by the U.S. Supreme Court. I had great interest in this because, well, I believed, based on my own experience in the D.C. courts, in which I later learned that the judge in my case withheld exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys, which would have proved that I had done nothing wrong. I had hoped that those convictions, for which I was fully pardoned, would be revisited in view of the fact that my attorneys believe, and to believe to this day, that Robert Mueller's appointment, like Jack Smith's appointment, was unconstitutional. It was raised by a witness during my trial. The trial judge, of course, denied it. It went to the D.C. Circuit, the most politicized circuit probably in the country, where it was wrongly decided. I'm not a lawyer, but I did learn that expression. It looks to me like it will never be decided, at least not in these cases. Now, the reason this is other reasons this is of interest to me is, as you know, Matt Gaetz, who is an attorney, and is a very able guy. You can tell that in the way he questions witnesses in the hearings at the U.S. House, could now conceivably be appointed a special counsel, which would not require, according to the Biden Justice Department, the confirmation of the U.S. Senate. So President Trump could, even though he is withdrawn his appointment as Attorney General, he could appoint Matt Gaetz as a special counsel to delve into, let's say, the Russian collusion hoax. What say you?
Mm-hmm. That's very, very interesting take on it. Actually, Pam Bondi would be the person as Attorney General appointing him. And you're right. If they would be very hard-pressed to argue against it because they have vociferously argued that there is no requirement for Senate confirmation for the position of special counsel like Jack Smith, and there would be no bar for Matt Gaetz to be appointed. So you're 100% right about that. I would point out that the D.C. Circuit, to the extent they have addressed this issue, has done so in very poor and cursory fashion. There is an article, very important law review article written by Steve Calabrese, Northwestern Law School, University Law School, that fully supports your position on the unconstitutionality of the appointment of the special counsel and, of course, supports Judge Eileen Cannon's position. But you're right, it looks like now it will evade review.
So, David, your reaction to the appointment, first of Pam Bondi. She served very ably here as our state attorney general in my home state of Florida. I know her well, have the highest possible regard for her. She's a woman of enormous courage. And I happen to think she understands that her job is to follow the directives of the chief executive. This is what's going to be different, in my opinion, about this Trump presidency and the previous one. The previous one, while he appointed many good men and women, he also appointed some people who got through the system because they were Republicans, but who really didn't share his agenda. In fact, some of them thought that their job was to dilute, delay, and derail his agenda. I don't see that happening again. Your thoughts on Pam Bondi?
Well, first of all, I think President Trump, as you know very well, is a very trusting person. And he trusted the bona fides of the people he appointed in the past. And many of them really turned not just on him, but on the institution of the presidency, undermined that. And some of them go out and write books and tell-alls and make a lot of money from it. And that becomes a cottage industry. In fact, one of his former lawyers, his own lawyer, I see on the TV all the time saying negative things about him, which I think violates his ethical responsibilities and continuing duties to a client. But anyway, putting that aside, my general comment would be this. The President of the United States has great discretion in choosing his cabinet picks. He can choose them on the criteria that he believes to be appropriate, as he has done in this case. It's true, the Senate confirmation is an important part of the process. Federal 78 talks about it, and so on. But it's the president's prerogative, ultimately, unless there's some disqualifying factor. And I'm not aware of any as to these appointments. Pam Bondi has an excellent reputation. I've spoken to people who worked on the first impeachment with her. First of all, she's a very nice person. But I also am personally aware from the materials that are out there that she has a great sense of the interplay between the criminal justice system and the healthcare system. She fought very hard against the fentanyl situation, and she should be an excellent choice. But you know these things far better than I do. It's like the varsity asking the freshman team a question. I'm sure your listeners know, there's no person more astute when it comes to political matters and the functioning of the government than you.
Well, that's very kind. You make an important point, though. That is, traditionally, a member of the Senate was only supposed to vote against a president's nominee for the cabinet, if there was some act of malfeasance, some criminal act. You weren't supposed to vote against them just because you didn't agree with their political philosophy. But that seems to be what's at play here. As I said earlier in the show, the idea that any senator would withhold their confirmation from Tulsi Gabbard, who has served her country in combat in both Iraq and Kuwait, was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, 4 terms in Congress, serving on the all-important Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Just because you disagree with her about the future of the Ukraine war, it seems to me to be a real corruption of the process. We are unfortunately out of time. Let me thank David Schoen once again for returning. He is a criminal defense attorney par excellence, the man we go to when we want to parse important and complicated legal matters. David, thank you so much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Coming up, folks.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, folks, is Luke Nichter. Luke Nichter is a professor of history at the James H. Kavanaugh Endowed Chair of Presidential Studies at Chapman University, one of the leading authorities on President Richard Nixon, President John F. Kennedy, and we look forward to him in our very next segment. So whatever you do, folks, Don't touch that dial.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China. China.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. I am joined now by Luke A. Nichter. Luke Nichter is a professor of history, and he is the James H. Kavanaugh Endowed Chair in Presidential Studies at Chapman University. Luke Nichter's area of specialty is the Cold War, the modern presidency, and U.S. political and diplomatic history, with a focus on the 1960s, literally the period from the election of John F. Kennedy to Watergate. He's an extraordinary author, has written a number of books, but his most recent book, The Year That Broke Politics, Collusion and Chaos in the Presidential Election of 1968, I think is now my favorite book on the topic. Prior to this, I thought The Melodrama of 1968, a book written by some British authors, was particularly good. There are several others about the 68 election. I think, frankly, Theodore H. White's book, The Making of the President in 1968, was a little lacking, but this book is a masterpiece. Luke Nichter, I thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
You are a very serious historian. I have read most of your books. I think that perhaps your greatest achievement is parsing through all of the presidential tapes of President Nixon. In fact, you are an expert on the secret White House recordings of presidents from Franklin Roosevelt all the way through Richard Nixon. It's amazing when I read John Dean's book, which was supposed to be a compendium of all of the Watergate-related tapes, several of the tapes in which he himself, I think, demonstrated his own role in Watergate, seem to be missing from that particular volume. We won't necessarily go there today, but I do want to ask you, before we move on to a very excellent piece you wrote for the Wall Street Journal about how the Ukraine war would not have surprised President Richard Nixon. Your book on the 68 election addresses the question that has been raised by a number of authors, including Lawrence O'Donnell and others, who allege that at the end of the 1968 campaign, when President Lyndon Johnson declared a bombing halt in Vietnam, that agents of Richard Nixon, candidate for president, used a go-between to contact the South Vietnamese to tell them not to go to peace talks because it was believed that such talks might boost the election prospects of Vice President Hubert Humphrey. You examined this extensively, and you came to a different conclusion. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. This is a story that's been on the public record since early 1969. It's really had new life in recent years, because after Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016, and those allegations of Russian collusion started almost immediately, based on my memory,
This earlier episode, back in 1968, the idea that Richard Nixon might have won the White House by colluding with a foreign power, that being President Nguyen Van Thieu of South Vietnam, fast forward to 2016, people all of a sudden rediscovered this old episode from 1968, because in 2016, the idea was, if you want to know how Trump might have done it with Putin and Russia, look back to how Nixon did it. And I didn't do anything special, to be honest. Everyone's repeated the story as if it's gospel truth. And I grew up, believing that it was either true or mostly true. And all I did was go back and check the sources in the archives, which actually very, very few people do. And that, I think, on top of the fact that, my background is blue collar. I grew up in Northwest Ohio. And I don't have any elite institutions or background to defend. So I went at this, I think, with without blinders, without preconceived ideas. And at the very end of it, what I added up, looking at all the evidence, is it doesn't prove much of anything. It doesn't prove that Richard Nixon colluded or did anything other than win in 1968. Just as we learned with Donald Trump after 2016, I think all those allegations evaporated away the same way.
I examined much of the same evidence, not to the detail that you did. I came up with a similar conclusion. The most important thing I, of course, realized was that there were no concessions from the North Vietnamese. So this bombing halt was based on exactly what, other than perhaps an effort to boost Vice President Hubert Humphrey. I cover this in my book, The Tricky Dick, The Rise and Fall and Rise of Richard M. Nixon. But the 1968 election is fascinating. People don't recognize that this was a three-way race. So Richard Nixon, who up until recently, I think, would be the man who had staged the greatest single comeback in American political history, had to run with Hubert Humphrey running to his left, but also George Wallace, governor of Alabama, running to his right. And in essence had to run between the raindrops. One of the most outrageous attacks on Nixon continues to be his employment of the so-called Southern strategy. When you look at his civil rights record, however, that doesn't hold up either. It was Richard Nixon who desegregated the public schools. They were overwhelmingly still segregated when he became president, under the leadership of Daniel Patrick Moynihan and George Shultz. And others. They were desegregated overwhelmingly by the time he left office, without violence, without bloodshed. It was Nixon who gave us affirmative action. It was Nixon who gave us the the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. Nixon who championed black capitalism. Nixon who quadrupled the funding for civil rights enforcement in the U.S. Justice Department during his presidency. And as you well know, Luke, it was Nixon who helped round up the votes necessary for the passage of the 1958 Civil Rights Act, which was essentially being quarterbacked by Lyndon Johnson, who never signed the Southern Manifesto, even though there's substantial evidence that he wrote it, planning a 1960 campaign for Congress. Yet another misnomer. I also have to say that your book on Henry Cabot Lodge, The Last Brahmin, is an extraordinary book. The full title of that, folks, The Last Brahmin, Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. and the Making of the Cold War. It's published by the Yale University Press. I really enjoyed this, particularly because his brother, John Davis Lodge, congressman from Connecticut, governor of Connecticut, ambassador to Spain under Dwight Eisenhower, ambassador to Argentina under Richard Nixon, ambassador to Switzerland under Ronald Reagan, was my political mentor. You do a great service. This book was really terrific. It is a shame that people don't know more about Lodge. He really, in many ways, U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, later ambassador to the UN. In a way, he sacrificed his own career. He was so busy electing Dwight Eisenhower that he lost re-election in 1952 to none other than John F. Kennedy. This is a tremendous achievement, I must tell you.
Well, I appreciate that, and of course, your listeners know, your audience. You're an intimidating interviewer because you know an awful lot of history, and only one of us has a tattoo of Richard Nixon, of course. But I think that, there's nothing there that you said I can possibly disagree with. I think I would add just one point, which is, we know that Americans love their history, and you look at Americans who take family vacations to see the Smithsonian or to walk our Civil War battlefields, or to visit our national parks from coast to coast. What Americans don't like often is the narrators of our history, who are often on one side politically and don't represent, the breadth of political views of our nation. And as I said earlier, given my own background, I try to write about stories that have been overlooked. Oftentimes, especially those right of center, don't have examples from history they can relate to, don't have examples from history that they can use to illuminate their understanding of the present and the policy discussions going on. And so what that means is one-sidedness of history means an awful lot of things go overlooked. And that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to correct in my career.
One of the most important things you do in your biography of Lodge before we leave this is debunking this claim that Lodge was a lazy campaigner and that is what cost Richard Nixon a skin-tight election. That was not true. You document that in your book. It was a bum rap. The choice of Lodge, which I think was heavily affected by President Eisenhower, was meant to accentuate the experience of the Nixon-Lodge ticket. He was acceptable to everyone in the party. And I think you debunked yet another falsehood that kind of bumps around American politics. Let's talk when we come back about this incredible piece that you wrote for the Wall Street Journal, where you found a declassified 1994 letter that President Nixon wrote to President Bill Clinton that seems to have foreshadowed the current conflict between Ukraine and Russia. This is of great interest to me. I worked very hard in the closing days of Nixon's life to get him a meeting with President Bill Clinton. The Bushes had never really treated President Nixon appropriately, particularly given the vital role that Nixon had played in George H.W. Bush's political survival after he lost not one, but 2 U.S. Senate races in Texas. But I did have a feeling that if Presidents Nixon and Clinton ever got together, that they would hit it off. They had the shared experience of having lost races for governor but come back to win the presidency. They both came from very humble backgrounds, and they were both the comeback kids in their own way. So when we return, we will talk to Luke Nichter, historian, distinguished historian and author, about this incredible piece in the Wall Street Journal in which, if you read it, folks, you see that Nixon was a very long-range thinker, to say the least. We'll be right back with the Roger Stone Show here with Luke Nichter, historian and acclaimed author. Please, folks, whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We're talking to Professor Luke Nichter, who is a professor of history and the James H. Kavanaugh Endowed Chairholder at the Presidential Studies at Chapman University. He is an acclaimed author of a number of books. I think I've read every one of them. I'm an admirer. I admit that right up front. You had an incredible piece in the Wall Street Journal back in July of last year when Bill Clinton eulogized Richard Nixon on April 27th, 1994. I was there, by the way, for the he spoke of the former president's wise counsel, especially with regard to Russia. He said, based on our last conversation, and the letter he wrote me just a month ago, he referred to that wise counsel. For nearly 30 years, the content of that letter remained a secret. You were able to get it declassified. You can now tell us what was in the letter and why it gives us a much greater understanding of Nixon's worldview and how he foresaw exactly what is going on today in this struggle between Ukraine and Russia.
Well, former President Nixon was known for writing fascinating letters. For most presidents, even a 1 or a 2-page single-spaced memo is a long letter, and Nixon would write 5, 7, 8 pages. And what's also striking is that he offered this unsolicited advice, not just to Republicans, but to Democrats too, because I think he really felt that was the best for the country. And in this case, I'd been after, I'd always heard that former President Nixon and President Clinton struck up a friendship, a camaraderie of sorts, especially as the young Clinton wanted Nixon's advice on especially Russia and China in his first year or two of office. Of course, Nixon dies in the spring of '94. And so I'd been after their correspondence, trying to get it declassified by the National Archives for about 15 years, and didn't really get much of interest. And then all of a sudden, I was sitting in a hotel room in Baltimore about a week before that piece appeared in the Wall Street Journal. And the Clinton Library in Little Rock says, we missed one of the letters in our earlier search in response to your request, and here it is. And I opened it up, and it was just this tremendous letter written, as you say, just before, about a month before Nixon died in 1994. He'd returned from a long trip to Russia and to Ukraine. And when you read it, you can't help but read it and think he not only understood the tensions in that part of the world that we see today, but the rise of Vladimir Putin, the turn of Russian leaders toward a more isolationist or nationalist approach. And I think his letter served as a real warning, not just one that was ignored back then, but one that I hope that we heed today.
I urge folks to read it. It was published by the Wall Street Journal on July 21st, 2023. One of the things that you have done, I think you can still find this at nixontapes.org, along with the historian Douglas Brinkley. You wrote 2 volumes on the Nixon tapes. The first one, Nixon, 1971, 1972, and then a sequel volume, 1973. Listening to and parsing the tapes has to be, or reading just reading the transcripts has to be an arduous process. Now, so-called historians like, Stanley Cutler, have actually changed the order of some of these tapes to make John Dean, the man who conceived of, pushed, and lied about the Watergate break-in for 19 straight months. But you have been scrupulously, I think, unbiased in these volumes. That has to have been an enormous undertaking for you and for Douglas Brinkley.
Well, it is, and I hate to say it, but in this labor of love, I even lost a little bit of hearing in my right ear listening to all these tapes. But I think it also goes to show you that an awful lot, and this does not make me popular at academic conferences to say this, but an awful lot that passes for history is actually not rigorously researched. Instead, we see it's often based on preconceived ideas or political commitments. And, people don't do rigorous research, or they stop right when they think they found something that proves the point they try to make. And I take a different approach, not just in these Nixon tapes books, but in all my books, which is, rigorous research. And, what's more important for the reader, to hear what I have to say or to hear what a president said on a tape? So I feel like it's pretty easy just to sit back and let my reader, actually hear or read what the president actually said. I feel like, no interference between the two is necessary.
These are extraordinary accomplishments. You have worked very hard filing over 2,000 Freedom of Information Act requests for the purpose of opening historically important records to public access. work that has been officially endorsed by the American Historical Association. You have worked very hard, really, just to uncover the facts. And for that, I salute you. Look, I'm an unabashed Nixon fan. Everybody knows that. He got us a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, opened the door to China when China had no technology, was a backwards agrarian society, ended the war on Vietnam on a faster timetable than that desired by the Pentagon, gave us the 18-year-old vote, did away with the military draft, launched the war on cancer, desegregated the public schools, and made for a safer, more secure world. You're not an opinion journalist, you're a historian, but I think all of your books prove these points, so I want to thank you again for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. And Luke, what is your next book?
I have a contract now to write something near and dear to your heart, which is a book on LBJ White House years. So the whole presidency, which puts me, it's going to be a big book. And so now I'm in direct competition with Robert Caro to see who can finish first. I probably won't get as many words as he does, but I'm hoping to finish the history of the 1960s. I've done now in 3 volumes because I want to move on to the 1970s, which, as you know, has been so poorly done. But Nixon, Watergate, the Church Committee, there's so many important subjects that deserve rigorous research.
Well, I think you're going to have very little, you're not going to have a hard time beating Mr. Caro. He manages to write multi-volumes about Lyndon Baines Johnson, but never once mentions Billy Sol Estes and the Billy Sol Estes scandal. How is that even possible? All right, Luke Nichter, thank you again for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up strong, he's following through. Nixon now, Nixon now. More than ever we need Nixon now, Nixon now, Nixon now. More than ever we need Nixon now.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, the most powerful, influential, and entertaining radio station in America. I'm Roger Stone on the microphone, and with me, my co-pilot, Jonas Jackson, on the boards. Folks, I'm a grizzled veteran of 13 national Republican presidential campaigns from Nixon to Trump, yet I give it to you straight. I give you what I consider, shall we say, the stone-cold truth. So I'll criticize both Republicans and Democrats. I have 45 years in the corroded rectum of the two-party system. I've seen it all, and I tell you exactly what I think. On January 25th, 2019, 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear, wearing night goggles and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, surrounded and then stormed my home at 6 o'clock in the morning to arrest me for the first time nonviolent crime of allegedly lying to Congress under oath in testimony that was voluntary. We now, of course, know that the judge in my case withheld exculpatory evidence that would have proved that I did not lie to Congress about any relevant, material, or meaningful matter. And we know, based on the special counsel report by Special Counsel John Durham, that there was no Russian collusion, nor did the government ever produce any evidence of WikiLeaks collaboration on my part. Now, this raid on my home was extraordinary. Normally, in the case of someone they were going to charge who had no previous criminal record, had no valid passport, did not have a firearm in the house, which they knew, they would merely contact your lawyer and have you turn yourself in. That's what normally happens. But in this case, because the government was on a shutdown and all of the FBI agents were being paid time and a half for overtime, the raid on my home cost taxpayers $1.1 million. I was, of course, subjected to a Soviet-style show trial in which I was denied every possible legal defense, but we now know why. The whole point of the charges against me was to pressure me into testifying falsely against President Donald Trump, which I, of course, refused to do. We learned only when a federal judge ordered the Department of Justice to release Robert Mueller's long-redacted, long-hidden final report that even Mueller could not sugarcoat the fact that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or for that matter, any other crime on my part. Senator Lindsey Graham then fired off a letter to James Comey, the director of the FBI, demanding to know who had approved the raid on my home. And this raid at 6 a.m., my wife still has PTSD to this day. Something goes bump in the night, and you might imagine she is on the ceiling. It's kind of hard to get over. Now, I would like to know to this day who ordered or who approved the raid on my home. Because, as I say, the normal process would be to just have you quietly turn yourself in. They would contact your lawyer. Now, my attorneys had actually been in touch with the special counsel's office the very day before, and we turned over 30 pages of text messages which proved that I had not lied before the committee regarding the role of an informant who told me that WikiLeaks had material on Hillary Clinton and they would publish it in October. But one can go on the internet at the time and see that Julian Assange himself had said that publicly. So it was never a secret. It is therefore of great interest to me that the president has now appointed Kash Patel as the director of the FBI. Kash Patel is a seasoned national security expert, but he's also, more importantly, the man who ran the Russian collusion investigation for the House Intelligence Committee under the leadership of Congressman Devin Nunes. Therefore, he knows exactly who in the FBI, who in the CIA, who in the White House, who in the national security apparatus perpetrated the greatest single dirty trick in American history. It is nothing less than the use of the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies utilizing two pieces of evidence that they knew were fraudulent. The so-called Steele dossier, which was a report that purported to include reports of Donald Trump, the private businessman, cavorting with Russian prostitutes while visiting Moscow on a business trip. It was a total fabrication, actually paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, but laundered those payments for it, laundered through a law firm. Interestingly enough, they charged Donald Trump in New York City in connection with the hush money payments, but they don't charge Hillary Clinton for paying for this particular piece of dirty work. And, of course, the false claim that the Russians conducted an online hack of the Democrat National Committee, something for which there's also no evidence whatsoever. At my trial, the judge would not allow for my defense attorneys to have the report of CrowdStrike, the third-party IT firm that the Democrats claimed had learned of this online Russian hack. In other words, the FBI admitted that they had never actually examined the servers for the DNC. I have been a strong supporter of the appointment of Kash Patel. We have a bite of him talking about the corruption at the FBI. Let's roll that.
We have a platform in Russiagate 1.0 where I and Devin Nunes and others uncovered the greatest criminal conspiracy the FBI and DOJ have ever implemented and conducted and caught them. And so now we have to go out there and educate Americans and saying the same authors of this Russiagate scandal are back at it again in positions of greater power, and we cannot fall for it. And you, the American public, must be provided not only the truth, but if you want accountability for these people who got away with it the first time, then we got to put Donald Trump back in office so we can use the Constitution on those in leadership positions in government that may have broken the law.
This is, I think, sending shockwaves into the FBI and maybe even some who have left the FBI. It's very interesting that the exact same D.C. federal prosecutor who wanted to give me a 7 to 9 year sentence for my refusal to testify falsely against Donald Trump is the same federal prosecutor who decided not to prosecute Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. McCabe, who was charged with crimes far more serious than those I was charged with. He was charged with leaking information regarding the investigation into Donald Trump to the media, faced no legal jeopardy because of the decision by J.P. Cooney, the prosecutor in my case. But McCabe is not very happy about the appointment of Kash Patel. Here's Andrew McCabe.
Andrew, I just want to start first with you and just get your reaction to this news tonight.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible development for the men and women of the FBI and also for the nation that depends on a highly functioning, professional, independent Federal Bureau of Investigation. The fact that Kash Patel is profoundly unqualified for this job is not even like a matter for debate. So I think what we should really be thinking about right now is what does this signal in terms of Donald Trump's intent for the FBI? The installation, or the nomination, I guess we should say at this point, of Kash Patel as FBI director can only possibly be a plan to disrupt, to dismantle, to distract the FBI, and to possibly use it as a tool for the president's political agenda. And, you know, as an organization, we know what that looks like. This country has been there before, right? The pre-Watergate FBI, the J. Edgar Hoover FBI, struck fear in the hearts of Americans across the spectrum of politicians, people in entertainment, people in the civil rights community, because the director operated at the direction of presidents to collect political intelligence and to utilize the legal authorities, the investigative authorities of the FBI to terrorize and intimidate Americans. So the question is that where we're going back to with this nomination? I would argue that Kash Patel would be the perfect person for Donald Trump to nominate if that's in fact his intent for the FBI.
Now, that is nonsensical bunk. Obviously, it is the conduct of James Comey and Mr. McCabe that recall the pre-Watergate FBI. After all, they sought to entrap a president of the United States. They opened an investigation on him, as we reported earlier today, a secret investigation, an off-the-books investigation, infiltrating his campaign without any predicate, meaning there was no evidence against Donald Trump. They opened the Crossfire Hurricane investigation without any evidence of Russian contact or collusion with Trump's campaign. And as for the question of Kash Patel's credentials for this job, he worked as a public defender serving in Florida, representing clients in multiple felony cases. He was a trial attorney working in the U.S. Department of Justice's National Security Division, acting as the legal liaison to the Joint Special Operations Command. He was the senior counsel on counterterrorism appointed to the House Intelligence Committee, contributing and driving the investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 elections. He was the senior director for counterterrorism, working for the National Security Council, focusing specifically on counterterrorism initiatives. He was the principal deputy to the acting director of the Office of National Intelligence. He was the acting chief of staff for the U.S. Secretary of Defense. He personally tried over 60 intelligence cases 50 intelligence cases, and he got a guilty verdict in every one of them. He is obviously extraordinarily qualified for this job. I'm anxious for him to become FBI director because I'd like to know who approved the raid on my home in which they sent more men and women to arrest me than they sent to arrest Osama bin Laden or El Chapo. Yes, I would like to know who ordered that investigation. It's, as I say, the beginning of a very fast start for President Donald Trump. As we know, Congressman Matt Gaetz was initially appointed Attorney General. He stepped aside when it became clear that his nomination would be problematic. And now you have Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi working with Kash Patel will get to the bottom of the criminal activities surrounding the Russian collusion hoax. When we come back, folks, we're going to be taking your calls a bit later. That number, 800-848-9222. Again, 800-848-9222. We'll start taking your calls at about 5:30. So you want to get online there, we'll be happy to talk to you. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on the most dynamic radio station in the United States of America, 77 WABC. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. And if you're not tuned into us at 770 on your AM dial, well, you can hear us worldwide at WABCradio.com because we're live streaming in 163 countries. We'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. As I said, I'm extraordinarily pleased with the president's decision to appoint Kash Patel, who was the senior counsel to the House Intelligence Committee under Chairman Devin Nunes, the man who ran the investigation into the Russian collusion hoax. And their report, if you go back and look at it now, holds up extraordinarily well. They figured out exactly what the criminal conspiracy that went on at the FBI and the CIA was against President Donald Trump. One of the other great appointments, I think, by President Trump so far is that of upstate New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Elise Stefanik is a bulldog when it comes to the law and to fairness, and she has been particularly good at attempting at her congressional oversight responsibilities in terms of trying to get the FBI to provide the information to Congress that they were supposed to. Here is Elise Stefanik talking about the raid at Mar-a-Lago.
Sign off on the Mar-a-Lago raid?
Well, first off, it was not a raid. It was an execution of a search warrant.
Did you sign off on the execution of the search warrant?
May I finish? Second, I don't sign off on individual search warrants in that case or in any other.
Did Attorney General Merrick Garland sign off to your awareness?
I can't speak to the Attorney General.
Was there dissent at senior levels of the FBI about the conducting of the search warrant?
I can't speak to internal discussions among the FBI or among the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Even though it's been reported in the Washington Post?
There are lots of things reported in the media.
I know, leaked from your agency. Leaked from your agency frequently. It's reported in the Washington Post.
It may or may not be accurate.
It may or may not be accurate.
That was, of course, FBI Director Christopher Wray being questioned by Elise Stefanik. Here's another clip of Elise Stefanik and FBI Director Wray that is worth listening to.
I would just say I'll refer you to the special counsel who has...
It's not a question about the special counsel. Right. That's a requirement in the IAA of the FBI. Is there a counterintelligence investigation into either Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
There's no investigation that I could confirm here, no.
Is there a counterintelligence investigation?
Again, I'm not confirming any investigation into either candidate.
Are you aware that you're required by the IAA to notify Congress of any counterintelligence investigation?
And we will comply with the law.
Have you already complied with the law? Has there been a notification?
I believe we have been in compliance with the law.
You believe you have been, or has there been a notification to Congress of any counterintelligence investigation of a federal candidate?
I believe we have complied with the law.
Has there been a counterintel assessment conducted on either President Biden or President Trump?
Again, there's no assessment that I would confirm here in any way. I believe we have been in compliance with the law.
How about on an immediate family member, and by that I mean spouses or children, of either President Biden or President Trump?
Again, I'm not in the business of confirming, especially not in open hearings, assessments or anything like that when it comes to counterintelligence matters.
So you will confirm in the classified setting when we ask you this question of whether there's a counterintelligence investigation, because you are aware that according to the IAA, you are required by law to notify Congress of any counterintelligence investigation, not just for presidential candidates, but any federal candidate.
We will comply with the law.
So you will answer this in the classified hearing later today?
We will comply with the law.
And what's your understanding of the law?
There's a whole series of oversight requirements that we have related to counterintelligence matters. I'm not going to try to go through all of them. But specifically the notification
of Congress of a counterintel investigation onto a federal candidate, what is your understanding of the law?
Again, I would want to refer to the lawyers to make sure that I'm appropriately complying with it, but I can tell you we're going to comply with the law, and my understanding is we have been.
Is your assessment that you're required to notify Congress of any counterintel investigation into any federal candidate?
I'm going to defer to the lawyers as to the precision of that.
You're the director of the FBI. They report to you. What is your understanding of the requirement in the IAA?
We're going to comply with the law, including whatever's in the IAA.
There you have it. Elise Stefanik, a bulldog, a staunch supporter of President Donald Trump, and an excellent appointee to represent our country's interests at the UN. One appointment that I'm scratching my head about is that of Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who has been appointed evidently to some national security post. I thought initially that he was Deputy National Security Advisor. That does not appear to be true. Now, the last time I saw this guy, he was hawking hemorrhoid cream on a late-night cable TV show. He is a cheerleader for continuation of the war in Ukraine. I believe that he has been expelled from his native country of Hungary. Here is Colonel Douglas McGregor, right here on the Roger Stone Show, questioning the judiciousness of this appointment.
The war is now effectively over. Ukraine is destroyed. And contrary to what anybody says in Washington, they could give a damn what happens to the people of Ukraine. But Donald Trump does care. He spoke publicly, and he said the killing must end. He needs to announce that he's going to suspend any more aid to Ukraine, period. No more military aid, and that he is evacuating all U.S. personnel, military, political, intelligence, makes no difference. Everyone who's a U.S. citizen in or out of uniform needs to get out. And once he does that, that will set the stage for everything to end, because the fighting cannot go on if the aid stops. What he must not do is listen to the fanciful notion expressed very recently by this man, Sebastian Gorka, who for some reason is running around declaring that he's a future deputy national security advisor, which is a frightening prospect given his background. But he's saying that, he's going to threaten President Putin with even more aid to Ukraine if evil Putin does not stop. Look, we have to come to terms with two realities. Just as you have Mexico today is an organized crime state, that is exactly what Ukraine is. It's an organized crime state. And we've shoveled hundreds of billions of dollars into that place. It's done no good. It's a bottomless pit for our resources. It's killed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. There is no future in it. The best thing we can do is to get out from under this organized crime state. Stop pretending that we're underwriting liberal democracy there. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is the most Stalinist-like regime that Ukraine has seen since Stalin died in 1953.
That was Colonel Douglas McGregor with a critique of the appointment of one Sebastian Gorka. I share his concerns. Folks, the Italian-American Civil Rights League, a nonprofit which stands up for an Italian-American heritage and culture, is having its first annual Christmas celebration and awards ceremony on December 15th in Little Italy. The IACRL, the Italian-American Civil Rights League, is a nonprofit organization that fights, as I say, to preserve Italian-American culture and heritage. It is a nonprofit. Everyone involved, including myself, are volunteers. We have no overhead other than the maintenance of our website. You can learn more about our Christmas celebration by going to IACRL.org. That's IACRL.org. Again, December 15th in Little Italy is going to be that amazing Christmas celebration. I urge you to check it out. Tickets are still available. Also remind you, coming up at 5:30, we're going to begin taking your calls. That call-in number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. If you want to get in line for those questions, whether it is history, politics, news, food, culture, anything you want to talk about, it's on the table, just to keep it clean. That's the one thing we do ask. I also am watching very carefully the New Jersey governor's race. Now, New Jersey is one of only two states who has its elections in the off years. That governor's race has essentially begun. Democrat Congresswoman Mickey Sherrill seems to be the front runner on the Democrat side. She has raised an incredible $600,000, which would be submitted to the New Jersey State Campaign Finance Matching Fund program. I believe it is still a 2-to-1 match. As long as the contribution is below a certain amount, that would put her, presuming that her fundraisers are capable, which they clearly are, is having a war chest out of the box of $1.2 million. On the Republican side, liberal Republican State Senator John Bramnick has announced, as has Jack Citarelli, who ran such a close race against Democrat Phil Murphy last time. Citarelli's also back in the race. Because neither one of those candidates are particularly associated with the America First wing of the Republican Party, and with President Donald Trump only losing New Jersey by a mere 5 points, and I stress to you that New Jersey was not targeted by the Trump campaign simply because they had to spend their money on swing states. It was not foreseen that the New Jersey result would be that close. It definitely demonstrates that New Jersey can go red in the next gubernatorial election. All eyes now on Mike Crispy, who was a Trump delegate to the last Republican National Convention and who heads the America First Republicans of New Jersey. He has scheduled an announcement for December 5th. We will keep you up to date on the developments there. This could become an extremely competitive Republican primary for governor of the Garden State. And of course, that takes place next year. The outcome of that election will, of course, be read as an early read on how President Donald Trump is doing in his new term. We're going to be watching to see if Mike Crispy, who's been on the show, enters the race for governor. He's certainly hinting about it, but we'll cover that race, both the Democrats and the Republicans, as things develop. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Point out yet again, we're going to be taking your questions shortly at 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. As a final thought, I was disturbed by multiple public reports this week by President Vladimir Putin of Russia, of all people, who says that President Donald Trump is not safe, that his life is still in danger. Now, you would call that a conspiracy theory if there hadn't already been 2 attempts on the president's life, 2 attempts in which we still, I don't think, have all the answers. So when people ask me what's the best thing they can do, I say, Well, the answer, folks, is prayer. Now, the Washington Monthly made fun of me when I said I was redeemed in the blood of the cross, that I'd return to the church of my parents and grandparents. I don't really care what they think. I only care what he thinks, if you know what I mean. But if you love your country and you love the president and you're excited about the change that's coming in America, I urge you to join me. When I say the rosary every night, I include President Trump in my prayers and the members of his family. I urge you to do the same. You're tuned into the Roger Stone Show on the most dynamic, influential radio station in America today, 77 WABC Radio, and we'll be right back to take your questions.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. This is the Roger Stone Show. I'm Roger Stone on the microphone and my co-pilot Jonas Jackson on the boards, and we're ready to take your questions. That number again, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Let's go to Scott in the Bronx. Scott, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Yes, good evening, Roger. How are you? With regard to two things, number one, I actually wanted to thank President Trump for his remarkable victory. And also, the problems facing this country are really they're not insurmountable, but they are staggering. That being said, to get a good idea, especially about how we got here with regard to immigration, especially post-1965 when the laws were changed, number one, I wanted to recommend a good book. It's The Culture of Critique by Dr. Kevin McDonald. It goes into the lobbies that pretty much were behind changing the immigration laws in 1965 when they finally succeeded and led to the literal inundation of the United States with tens of millions of people from the third world. That was all done in 1965. So I would add, and there's an entire chapter devoted to the immigration mess in the book. It's The Culture of Critique by Dr. Kevin McDonald. Okay, and second thing I wanted to get to is Kash Patel and his nomination to head the FBI. I think it's absolutely critical that Americans of good will, on whatever point on the political spectrum you actually fall on, to understand that the police agencies over the last few decades have arrogated power to themselves to the point where they are really irrespective of whether or not you're a law-abiding citizen. You can find yourself entrapped. You can find yourself charged with crimes that you did not commit in order to serve a political end. And again, I don't care who's in power, whether you're a liberal, you're a conservative, you're on the left, the right, it does not matter. If police agencies are politicized and courts and the judiciary is weaponized to target and prosecute and persecute political opponents and for purely political motives, that is something you should only expect from totalitarian societies, not from the United States, a country based on the rule of law and where the sanctity of the individual is paramount and sacrosanct. It should not be a situation whereby the government can arbitrarily charge you with anything it likes just simply because they don't like your political opinions and they don't like your ideology. Again, that's only for totalitarian societies. It shouldn't be happening to anyone. Now, what's really ironic is that the left of all people should understand that clearly. Because if you recall, back in the 1960s and 70s, during the Civil Rights Movement and the protest movement against the Vietnam War, it was the people on the left who were being subjected to COINTELPRO, the very same organization we're talking about now.
All right, Scott from the Bronx, thank you very much, making two very key points. This is the Roger Stone Show. I am the man who, as Curtis Sliwa says, knows where the bodies are buried. So if you have a question, please call us at 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. Let's go to Joe out in New Jersey. Joe, welcome to the Roger Stone Show. What is your question?
Roger, on November 5th, America spoke loud and clear as to what they want President Trump to do. I kind of fear Mitch McConnell is still going to call the shots in the Senate, and I see him between John Thune, Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins trouble with a lot of Donald Trump's picks for his cabinet, especially Kash Patel.
I think it's a very legitimate concern. Tomorrow I will publish a piece on my Substack on recess appointments and how they work. I can show you how, if he cannot get Senate confirmation, President Donald Trump could appoint Kash Patel to head the FBI, and he could serve for up to 420 days without Senate confirmation. Now, hopefully we don't have to go that route. I'm not sure that it is McConnell himself who's calling the shots, but I do know that in the recent election for a Republican leader inside the Republican caucus, they had a secret vote. In other words, people were able to cast a secret ballot, and thus we found out the difference between a caucus and a cactus. You see, on a cactus, well, all the pricks are on the outside. The right man for that job was Senator Rick Scott, a firm supporter of Trump's America First agenda, but instead the Senate Republicans chose John Thune, a Karl Rove Republican, and therein lies the problem. Now, many are cold, but few are frozen, and I would not assume that all the senators you mentioned will vote against all of President Trump's nominees. I think ultimately some of them can be reasoned with. After all, the president is really entitled to his nominees. That is the way the system works, unless you can find some act of malfeasance, something illegal they have done. The claims by some, such as Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, who was the UN ambassador and ran for president, that Tulsi Gabbard is not a loyal American because she doesn't want to ship billions more to Ukraine, because she questions the war machine, because she left the Democrat Party, because it was once the party of peace and civil rights. Today it is the party of war and police surveillance, is outrageous. I don't think we know the clear answer to this yet. President Trump will fight for his nominees. So far, I think they have, to a person, with the exception of Mr. Gorka, if he is in fact appointed, I think his appointments have been excellent. Time will tell. Thank you so much for calling in, though, to the Roger Stone Show. Again, folks, that number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Tony in Clifton, New Jersey, you're on the line. Welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger Stone. You know, as you're a truth teller, when I look at this administration, I'm looking for Kash Patel, focusing on him for the moment in truth telling. Where do you see a place for oral history as we go through the stories of yourself, of John Eastman, of Peter Navarro? Can oral history be used to educate America as to how we've become a banana republic in just, maybe to me it seems like 4 years, although it could have been more than that, as you know, your experience. But we need to educate America, and oral history, listening to stories like yourself and John Eastman and many others, and those even in the press, Matt Taibbi. Do you see a place for oral history as we do like President Trump did? He re-educated America, Roger Stone, as to what happened to him and his story. And I think these stories need to come out. And also the topic of reparation for people who suffered because of the attacks by the left in this banana republic.
I think you make a very, very good point. It's interesting because after General Michael Flynn was pardoned, I urged him to both write a book and to produce a documentary to actually lay out his experience and the reason why he had been targeted and legally persecuted. That's because I understand the relentlessness of the American left. It does not matter how many times their false claims are debunked or disproven or completely destroyed. If you just wait a couple weeks, they'll be back to recycle them yet again. So, for example, Congressman Adam Schiff, unfortunately the senator-elect from California, on CNN last night, insisting yet again, no, we did find evidence of Russian collusion with Donald Trump's campaign. Now, what he said was he had seen more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. He's never produced anything of the kind. Now, what he falls back on is the claim that a high-level Trump campaign official was sharing polling information with a Russian intelligence asset. That is a lie. How do we know it's a lie? Go to the book by Paul Manafort, who has, I think, done an excellent job of laying out his horrific experience. At the time in question, first of all, the official that Schiff refers to is Manafort, who was serving as Trump's campaign manager. At the time in question, the Trump campaign had no proprietary polling information. They had not yet conducted their own polls into the general election. So any information that Manafort may have given to a man named Konstantin Kilimnik, who Schiff falsely claims is a Russian intelligence asset, would have been public information that you could have gotten on the internet. Secondarily, as the independent journalist Matt Taibbi has absolutely proved, Konstantin Kilimnik was not a Russian intelligence asset. He was a U.S. intelligence asset. We know this because the cables from the State Department, from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv to our State Department include his reports in which his name is actually redacted because he was keeping our government apprised of the situation on the ground in Ukraine. This is why I think it was vitally important for General Flynn to produce the great movie, Flynn, the movie, which, if you haven't seen, I very strongly recommend to you. Manafort has produced his tome. I'm still working on the book about the abuse of my wife and I and our family by the Mueller investigation, in which we learned only after BuzzFeed sued the U.S. Justice Department and Robert Mueller was forced to disgorge his long-hidden secret report that he admitted that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. In fact, he did say that if he had found evidence that I had gotten materials from WikiLeaks, which he did not, he concluded that such actions would not be a crime. Now, compare that to what Mueller's prosecutors told a federal judge when they got the search warrants for my email, my cell phone, and my home, my apartment in New York, and my office, my studio in Florida. They said that they had probable cause to charge me with treason, conspiracy against the United States government, counterfeiting, that's one of my favorite ones, money laundering, unauthorized access to a government computer, mail fraud, wire fraud, and aiding and abetting a felony both before and after the fact. No such evidence ever appeared, but I will tell you, they went into my home for 13 hours. My wife was forced to sit in the corner, not allowed to touch her cell phone. My grandchildren, having seen this horrific experience on television, had no idea whether my wife was safe, had no idea where I was, had what was going on, and they absolutely ransacked my home for 13 hours. They took every drawer in the home and dumped it on the floor. They went through the entire bookcases. I have many books. They went through each one, threw them on the floor to ensure I wasn't hiding anything inside the books. If there was a picture hanging on the wall, they would take a box cutter and cut out the back of the frame to ensure that I wasn't hiding anything inside the frame. By the way, the same thing went on at my studio, as well as my apartment in New York, which I no longer have because I can no longer afford it. So other than that, losing our savings, losing our home, losing our insurance, losing my car, losing for 2 years my ability to make a living because I had a gag on me, which was unconstitutional. I couldn't comment not just on my own case. I wasn't allowed to comment on any public question. Well, I make my living by talking and writing. So I had no income for 2 years. But I must tell you, writing that book is extraordinarily difficult. I can work on it for about an hour and a half, and then, in all honesty, I want to vomit because there were so many falsehoods told, so many lies recycled by supposedly responsible media outlets. I will write it, I will publish it, and I have a tentative name. It is Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong. All right, we are taking your questions here at the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. That number again, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Don't go away, folks, because we'll be right back to take more of your calls.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back taking your calls at 800-848-9222. The late Lou Dobbs, who was a great friend of mine, had a great show here at 77 WABC, always told me that I should always take calls in a segment. He loved to do it. He was very good at it. I don't do it enough, so I decided to do it today, even though we had great breaking news with the appointment of Kash Patel to head the FBI. I think this is among the single most significant appointments that Donald Trump will make in terms of cleaning up the bias in our criminal justice system. And you see on television, on CNN, MSNBC, you see Andrew Weitzman, the most corrupt prosecutor in U.S. history. This is a man who covered up mob murders when he was a prosecutor in New York. Sammy the Bull got away with a number of murders thanks to Mr. Weitzman, the same guy who knew that the Steele dossier was a fraud when he was the general counsel to the FBI, but went along with using it as the rationale for the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller, the man who wrote my indictment because he very clumsily left his initials in the metadata tags on the leaked version of that court-sealed document. The same Andrew Weitzman who erased the memories of the cell phones of Robert Mueller's prosecutors when they were under subpoena by special counsel John Durham. He talks endlessly about the rule of law, but he has no interest in the rule of law. He is a political hitman, and it's only a matter of time before someone does a book and a documentary on his storied career. He and Andrew McCabe, who was charged with crimes far more serious than those I was charged with, but the prosecutor in my case was the prosecutor in his case. He announced that there would be no prosecution of Mr. McCabe without explanation. Two-tiered justice, anyone? Anyway, let's go back to your calls. Let's see, David in New Jersey. Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. What is your question?
Hey, Roger, thank you very much for taking my call. And listening to you really disturbs me. I can imagine, I'm going to say a prayer for you and your dear wife for hanging tough with all this politicization of the FBI, which is terrible, And just another thing, I love your reference to religion because one of my favorite quotes is by St. Augustine, and it's the following: "Truth is like a lion. Let it loose. No need to defend it. It can defend itself."
I appreciate it really does. I appreciate your inspirational reference. A lot of people say, oh, well, Stone talks about his faith, and that's a head fake, that's a posturing. Look, I've lived a wild life. I admit that I am certainly no saint. I'm a sinner like all of us. I'm less than perfect. I'm not any kind of Christian prophet. But I do consider myself now a soldier in the army of the Lord, and I am serious about trying to follow the Ten Commandments, and it does change your life. It is uplifting in a way that I cannot even really describe. So it has played an important role for my wife and I in our survival of this entire horrific experience, and I appreciate your raising it. The Washington Monthly made fun of me when I gave an interview in which I talked about my renewed belief in the Lord and in the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is elitist nonsense. And it's annoying, but I ignore it. We do need to clean out the FBI. It is epically corrupt, and I think Kash Patel is absolutely the man to do it. Establishment heads are exploding in Washington. He's actually talking about closing down the J. Edgar Hoover building and decentralizing the FBI. There needs to be more oversight. He is absolutely ultra qualified for this job. This idea that he's unqualified, when you look at Andrew McCabe, who was never even a station chief, but he became the deputy director. Talk about unqualified. There you have it. Thank you so much, David, for your call and to reminding us that it is he who will sit in judgment. All right, Harriet in Sheepshead, welcome to the Roger Stone Show. Harriet, what is your question?
Oh, Roger, thank you very much again for taking my call. Three of the most dangerous words in the English language are Barack, Husseini, Obama, an Islamist and a confirmed Marxist. What is to prevent the former president for going at it for a fourth term here to get security reports and use them to undermine our dear President Donald J. Trump and his administration? And thank you again, Roger.
Well, constitutionally, of course, Barack Obama cannot seek another term. I would argue he already had his third term. That was the term of Joe Biden. We saw the Obama policies, for example, in the Middle East. It is Obama who wanted to unfreeze $190 billion plus in assets and give them to Iran. It was Obama who reached a nuclear weapons agreement with Iran, in which we actually provided pallets of cash to be paid as bribes that were never accounted for to the American people. This idea that strengthening Iran would create greater balance in the region is nonsense. Does anyone believe that if we had not essentially renewed the wealth of Iran, that they would have attacked Israel? The fact that before they got the money, they said they would use it for humanitarian purposes, but once they got the money, it was clear that they used it to finance Hamas and Hezbollah and the October 7th heinous attack on Israel. It's also clear that they have used the money to restart their nuclear weapons development program. Some military experts that I respect tell me that they believe that thanks to their alliance with the Chinese, that the Iranians already have nuclear weapons. That is a scary prospect. But you're right about the fact that it was Barack Obama who decided to dump Joe Biden. It was Barack Obama who decided to anoint Kamala Harris, which turned out to be one of the greatest mistakes ever made. Amazing that this past week, David Plouffe, who was paid $10 million for his expert leadership of Kamala's campaign, which is pretty amazing. They paid $10 million to Beyonce so that she would not sing at a concert. They even had to pay Reverend Al Sharpton to get an interview on his platform, which is amazing to me. The Rev got, I think it was $500,000 to his nonprofit. If he supported Kamala, you would think that he would have had her on the show for free, but evidently that is not the case. I think that he and his wife continue to be the dominant factor in the modern Democrat Party. After all, they were able to line up Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries to dump Kamala Harris, to dump Joe Biden. Now, the reason for that was, I believe that they threatened to remove Joe Biden under the 25th Amendment if he did not step aside. And had they done that, that requires a vote of the majority of the cabinet plus the acquiescence, a majority of the cabinet and the vice president. Now, if the president who's being removed wants to challenge removal, he can take it to both houses of Congress. That's why it was so vitally important for Barack Obama to line up Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, so that Joe Biden had no choice. I believe Joe Biden remained extremely bitter about this to the very end. Those were awful broad smiles on the faces of both President-elect Donald Trump and Joe Biden when President Trump visited the White House. No, I don't think it was insignificant that Jill Biden wore a bright red dress when she went to vote. And my own sources in the Democrat Party tell me that she refused requests to campaign for Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris came out with a video. I've watched it 2 times. I still can't quite understand what it was she was saying. Something about taking your joy. I'm not sure, but I do know this. She's thinking about running for governor of California. She couldn't be any worse than Gavin Newsom, although the entrepreneur Grant Cardone made a very, very comprehensive case online the other day about looking at the big vote for Donald Trump in California, why he may make that race, which I think would be extraordinarily interesting. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi has no intentions of going away. She has once again filed with the Federal Election Commission to run for a 21st term. Evidently, the stock tips from insider trading are just so good, she doesn't want to walk away. This is a party that is lost. The party that once followed Kennedy and Truman now follows Marx and Lenin. And whether they can ever produce a nominee who's in the mainstream and who speaks to the middle class and its needs, speaks to working Americans again, well, that remains to be seen. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your calls, but we're going to try to take calls again next week because I see that it is very, very popular. I want to remind you to go to the app store on your cell phone and download the 77 WABC app so you don't miss any of the great programming here on 77 WABC, particularly my friend Sid in the morning, one of my favorite shows, Larry Kudlow on Saturdays. Great honor to be with you. And right now, I ask you to stay right where you are on the dial because my great friend Joe Piscopo, a guy who has an amazing set of pipes himself, is coming up with his great show, Sundays with Sinatra. So if you're ready to listen to Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board, along with my friend Joe Piscopo, don't go away.